Today we're speaking with Rob McNurlin. He is a singer-songwriter who focuses on country, folk, and hillbilly blues music. Drawing inspiration from artists such as Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, and Woody Guthrie, he blends these styles with his own unique twist. Rob has toured all across North America, England, and Australia, playing on stages large and small in a career that spans 25 years. He's played with some of the best artists in the genre and produced 10 records under his label Buffalo Skinner Records. Rob shares with us his own unique path through music, how to apply humility and inspiration in our work, and just why we need to love what we do every day. Just to start off, I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about your career in music and how you ultimately got into playing the types of music that you do.
Well, Mom and Dad had this great record collection when I was growing up. Mom had the 45s, and it was Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Johnny Cash, Sun Records, you know, all that. And Dad had Hank Williams and Sons of the Pioneers and those kind of records. And the funny thing is this would have been towards the late 60s when I really started getting into music. And I would hear Mom and Dad say that they didn't like rock and roll. And so I thought Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Elvis and all that was country music, which I guess by today's standards it may be. And they listened to that stuff all the time. And so what really kicked it into gears when Johnny Cash had his TV show starting in '69. And I think that came on the summer of '69, and that Christmas I asked for a guitar.
Probably growing up you were exposed through different records that your parents had, that type of music, but then also attending church.
Yeah.
You know, you would have been exposed to gospel music, and that is its own genre of music. Right. Had you ever tried playing rock and roll or going down that pathway? Yeah. You know, did you end up coming back to country music because just something spoke to you about that?
Yes, I was in some rock and roll bands, had some garage bands and stuff, and even after I started playing out, we would still, and occasionally I still will pull out a rock and roll song. It just has to be the right one. But I remember a friend of mine really kind of steered me home on it. There's a Buffalo Springfield song called For What It's Worth. And me and my band played that one night in a coffee house. I think it was in Huntington, West Virginia, if I remember. And after the show, this buddy of mine came over and said, "Man, I love that song." And I said, "I do too." And he goes, "Please never sing that song again." And I looked at him like, "What?" And he goes, "Man," he said, "you've got a great voice, but you're so country sounding." He said, "You just don't sound right playing that song." And so I started thinking about it, and I have to, when I get outside of the country folk area, I have to really be picky or change it around enough because I just have that sounding voice. Anything I play is going to come out country sounding.
I think you mentioned to me before that you basically went full-time as a musician around 1993. And so that was when you started setting up your own gigs. You started playing with, you know, I'm sure backup bands, but then also doing solo performances. What went into the decision to go like full-time musician? Was it something you were already doing?
Well, I was doing it, but I hadn't really, you know, taken that serious leap of faith. And, you know, my first CD, when it came out, the distribution company really wanted us to come out there and play, and they were in Sacramento, California. And so me and the guys conceived this idea of booking shows across the United States, and we had an old hippie bus, old VW bus. The guitar player Dave Prince had that. And we set off and played those shows, and it was like, well, this is feasible, you know. And so I would book shows depending on the money or what the venue was, either solo or with the band, and, you know, and it just went from there.
I'm sure when you all piled into a hippie van, playing all of these different venues, really for the first time, full-time, you probably played some pretty interesting places. Some big venues, some little venues?
Still play some interesting places, yeah, still. Yeah, we played, well, when we played for the distribution company, we actually played in their cafeteria, and it was about the size of a motel room. And the drummer, we actually had a few little, crosswords with each other because there wasn't room for a drum kit. It's like, well, if you set up the drum kit, the people aren't going to be able to come in and hear us, And that was the whole reason we had done the tour. So he just played snare drum on that show.
Can you remember any of the larger venues or something that really stood out in your mind as like, wow, this was really a great success early on like that? Early
on, one of the first things I did early on, they do a thing Memorial Day called Rolling Thunder for the POWMIAs in Washington, D.C., and all the bikers go. And I had written a song kind of about that subject, and I'd actually donated it to the local chapter of whatever, I forget what it was now, but they were using it just for promotion and stuff. And so they wanted me to go to Washington and play. And they would have live music there. They would use right in front of the reflecting pool of the Washington Monument facing the Lincoln Memorial. They would use the steps of the Lincoln Memorial as seats. And so one of the first places I played was there, and I don't know, there were probably 20, 30,000 people there. And that was, you seemed like you had done something.
That must have made a huge impact on you as like a boost, sort of an
And there
inspiration.
again, though, I was like a sore thumb. There were all these soldiers, bikers, and there's this one knucklehead in the cowboy hat, But they all accepted me, so it was great. One of the strangest, but it was a nice place. There was a place, it was the Coal Creek Coffee Company. I remember the name of it. And it was just a little coffee house. And they had live music. And when we went in, it was odd because there was maybe 5 people in there when we started playing. And as we're playing, those 5 people start getting up and leaving. And we're all like, oh boy, this is going great. But they were into it. And this was long before internet, and you didn't text people. Nobody had cell phones and all that. They were going and getting their friends. And by the time we got halfway through the first set, the place was packed and we had a big time. But boy, just for that first few minutes, you're just sweating, thinking, well, the 5 people that's here's leaving. What are we doing?
I'm sure when you're in a performance like that, or you walk into this new venue and you don't know, who the crowd is, right, if they're going to receive the music as well as some others, I'm sure that can be sort of a nerve-wracking moment sometimes.
It is, and it's a lot. It's a lot easier when the band's with you because you can always just say, okay, we're playing off each other, and the audience doesn't matter. Now, when you're solo, you really start sweating bullets when that happens. And at that time, we were playing mostly original, but we weren't really doing anything cover-wise to make an audience do something they could relate to that they had heard before. And that was a lesson that I hadn't learned. You kind of sometimes got to help them wade in the water there. Let's play something that they're familiar with, and that helps.
So interesting. So from '93, you actually had an album that was recorded, but then you also went ahead and went on tour. So at the time, were you recording your albums, say in a garage, or did you have a studio space where you did that?
Well, I have always been blessed by having friends who had connections. We were actually recording in a little studio I'd built with a 4-track TAC reel-to-reel. And Dave Prince was playing guitar and bass on that. And Dave just asked me one day, we'd been recording 3 or 4 days, because I was kind of secret. In '93, nobody put out CDs and stuff. No, as far as I know, in the Eastern Kentucky area, we were probably the first people to put out a CD. Other people had albums, cassettes, and 8 tracks or something maybe back. 8 tracks had probably faded out by then. And I said, no, I'm going to put this out on a CD. And he said, well, we need to get, and he named this guy that I didn't know, Daryl James, in on this. And I was like, okay. And so he invited Daryl up, and Daryl was playing guitar, great guitar player, great guy. And Daryl asked me, he said, now what are you going to do with this? And I said, well, I'm going to put out a CD. And he said, well, let's go into the studio. He said, how many engineers studio down in Louisa, Kentucky? And I said, well, I don't have the money to go in the studio. And he goes, it's okay, I've got the keys, we'll go in at night. And so we did, and the owner knew we were going in. He was just a nice man. He's passed away now, but Otis Lynn. And so we went in, a nice studio. A lot of bluegrass bands record in there and stuff. But it wasn't like a big production. We went in 2 nights, cut the whole record, just dead live. And, but it worked out. And because of that connection, I got a real quality record that I didn't have to spend a fortune on.
It's really interesting that in a genre like country music and folk, you were able to use a CD, you know, what was probably cutting edge technology at the time, and had the forethought to then distribute that way and really get your music out there. Did you find there was a pretty good appetite for that kind of music in your area when you first got started?
No, in the area, nobody had a clue what we were doing, because it was, at the time, the songs I were writing, they sounded country and they sounded bluesy, and the lyrics were kind of out there like some Bob Dylan lyrics, and nobody had a clue what we were doing. We would play these festivals and people just, they didn't dislike it, but we were just, it was all an oddity. We would show up in the hippie bus, and part of them looked like hippies, I looked like a cowboy, and we were playing all these strange songs, and so it was great.
Well, it's interesting you found a band too that was able to help, you know, that mixed, you know, a pretty wide diversity of music together.
Yeah, they're a great bunch of musicians, great bunch of guys and musicians. I mean, I still get influence from those Johnny Cash and Hank Williams, and even the things that they were influenced by, old blues music and gospel. And we were talking about gospel a minute, you know, both of them recorded a lot of gospel music, but they didn't have the influence of reading books by Jack Kerouac and listening to Bob Dylan, or, well, Hank Williams might have heard Woody Guthrie, I don't know. But to me, it was all the same. I didn't really try to pigeonhole what it was, you know, but those guys I don't think made those distinctions. It's just people need a category to put something in. You know, I'm hesitant to use the word country anymore. Hank Williams never called his music country. He always either called it folk or hillbilly music. And country, good or bad, has kind of changed, and I'm not sure, I'm not a part of what new country music is. And so I'm hesitant, because when I say that, if you say, oh, I'm a country singer, people want you to do something that's relative to today's country, and I, you know, so a lot of times I just won't even use the word country.
Well, last night when we saw your show in Doylestown, I looked around the crowd a bunch of times, looked back, took some shots of the crowd, and I could tell there were a lot of people that were really into it.
Yeah, I think that there's a good bunch of people. Sometimes I'll just go into autopilot. If the audience is, you know, if everybody's just talking and doing their own thing and I'm just background music, I mean, I'm okay with that. That's the way the, you know, the dice got rolled that day. But when I can see people listening and pay attention, you know, I want to do the best I can for them. You know, nobody, I mean, the working part of the music business is booking shows and maybe writing songs. To me, writing songs are just therapeutic. But you know, traveling and getting there and that's the working part. While the guitar's in front of you, that's playing.
That's why they call it playing,
That's why they call it playing, that's right. You know, nobody says, oh, I got to go home and play the guitar, you know.
Have you seen much of a difference or much of a change in your music from the first album that you put out to where you are today?
Yeah, it hit me the other day, or last year, that first album came out 25 years ago. You know, that's a long time. The oddest thing is it almost has made a circle, because that first album, like I said, it wasn't really country. It had all these blues influences and that kind of, you know, Dylan kind of lyric thing. And so the most recent album sounds more like the first album than any of the other ones. It's odd.
Interesting.
You know, because it went real country there. And that was because some of the people that I was, you know, keeping company with, and they were big time musicians and they were into the country thing, and I wrote those kind of songs, and so it went really, really traditional country there for a while, but now it's kind of back to just doing whatever comes to mind.
Interesting. Do you have a particular favorite of the CDs that you've recorded?
My favorite is one called Cowboy Boot Heel, but I think the reason it's my favorite is we recorded it at Johnny Cash's studio, and John Carter, his son, produced it. While we were recording, Johnny was working in the same studio on one of his albums, the ones he was doing with Rick Rubin, those American recordings. And it was just so much fun going in, and you know, I'm sitting in the chair that Johnny Cash was sitting in 4 or 5 hours ago, and this is the mic he was singing into. And back then we recorded on ADAT tapes, you know, digital. And some of them said J Cash, some of them say R McNurlin, just in a big stack there. And that just, you know, him being that big an influence on me was just wonderful, just being in the studio.
So because you write your own music, I mean, you're coming up with the lyrics, you're coming up with the stories, where often do you find the inspiration for those pieces?
Well, I wished I knew. I used to try to write a song, or at least work on a song every day, and I realized I was wasting so much time. And now I just wait for the inspiration just to pretty much knock me down. It has to really hit and hit hard before, I even work on it. I'll write the idea down and then we'll go on. Some of them take a while, but all the good ones are really quick. Or the ones I think's good. I can't be the judge, because I've got songs that I thought were throwaway songs that people love, and vice versa. I've got songs that I just think are great, and I play them for people, and they just kind of yawn, and But so I think the ones that I like are the ones that, man, the idea hits, and 15, 20 minutes later, you've pretty much got the completed song. You might tweak a word here and there, and or a chord change or something, but. And others, I've got songs that I'm still working on, been working on for years, and I don't know if they'll ever get done. So.
How do you then roll that out to an audience? You've written a song, you've tinkered with it, you've strummed the chords. Now, how do you know it's ready for prime time?
And mine's just a gut feeling. It's just, and you're at the audience's mercy, And, a lot of times you'll try a song that you may not. It depends on the audience there. If you're playing for an audience that are really listening to the songs, you might pull something out that you might not even think's quite ready, and you tell them, say, hey, here's one I'm working on. I'm not sure where it's at. What do you all think? And if they're on your side, at least they'll be attentive and listen. And but if you're in a noisy bar or something, you don't even fool with it.
It's not worth dragging it out there. Just give it time.
No, yeah. There's a line in one of my songs that, let me think how the line goes. The name of the song's Sir Real Bad. But the lines, I've spent my time in the dives yodeling out the blues. Yeah, and sometimes that's all you're doing is biding time, and it's a paycheck. But you can always, or hopefully, you can find the few people that's listening and into it, and you play to them and ignore everybody else.
In thinking of the live venue versus sort of a closed environment, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what are the differences between recording something that's mostly done in a studio or a controlled environment, as opposed to actually getting on stage and then performing that music to an audience?
Well, the audience has a lot of control over what's going on. They may not realize it, but if you're up there just beating your head against the wall and they're not into anything, you try different things. I used to travel some with a friend of mine, Ramblin, Jack Elliott. He was with Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan, and he had a big influence on Bob Dylan. But he told me one time he was playing a show opening for the Grateful Dead, and he said it was just him and an acoustic guitar. He's a folk singer. And he said he played something kind of loud and, really upbeat. And he said nobody was listening. And he thought, well, I'll play something real quiet and slow and finger pick the guitar. And he said still nobody was listening. He said I tried every trick I could, and after about 3 songs, I realized nobody's listening. And he said as he was walking off stage, Jerry Garcia was standing there, and he said, Jack, where you going? He said, well, I'm quitting. There's nobody listening. And Jerry Garcia said, well, I'm listening. So, there might be that one person, and it might be Jerry Garcia that's listening. So you got to just keep playing. But the audience has that control. Now, in the studio, you've got the other musicians, or if you're playing a solo song, you just got to work on it. And I've only done one album where it was, okay, I'm going to record this guitar part and then overdub a guitar part. Most of my stuff in the studio, we set up and play just like a live band. There might be an occasional overdub or something, but most of the time it's just like playing live, but there's no audience.
It's interesting you mentioned how much control the audience has when you're up there as a musician performing, you're doing your music, you're going through your set. You don't necessarily think of the audience as having control over your performance, but as someone who's up there playing, how can you tell when the audience is listening or when they're not listening or when they're really getting into your music?
You can see it on their face. And especially if if they're up dancing or singing along, then they're on your side. But you never know from audience to audience. I did some shows opening for Hot Tuna, Jorma Kaukonen's band, and their audience, and none of his audience knew who I was, but they took me under their wing and took me out on the road with them. All their audiences were great. They accepted my music. They bought CDs. They seemed to really enjoy it. and except for one place. And we played this place, and I'm not going to mention the name of the place or anything, but it was horrible. I was just like, that was the longest 45 minutes of my life. And I just thought, good grief. And years later, I was talking to Yorma and his wife, and we were just, reminiscing. And I said, of all the places that we played, and his wife just named the place immediately. And I said, how did you know? She goes, oh, that's the worst place in the world to play. And I said, even for them? She goes, oh yeah, it's just a bad place to play. So, I didn't feel so bad about it then. I don't think it had as much to do with me as it just did the place and the audience there. I don't know.
So I've heard that, for a long time, you worked without a manager. You act as your own manager, and you're out there booking gigs, you're, traveling, getting to these locations. What's it like managing, your own self in booking the gigs?
It's horrible. For instance, if I call a venue and want to play, I've got to sell myself. Well, if I push too hard, I sound like an egomaniac. This guy possibly couldn't be as good as he says he is. And if you don't push at all, they're like, well, this guy doesn't even believe in himself. And so where's that fine line? And that fine line probably changes depending on who you're talking to, and it's somebody I've never met. So it's just an odd thing. Once you've played someplace, unless their whole management changes, which it does a lot, and then you start all over, it's easy to go back and play the same place again. But if it's a total new place and everything, usually the way I find that place is maybe look at somebody's touring schedule that kind of does what I do, and see the venues they're playing. And try to say, okay, that would be a place I could probably play. And then you contact them and hope for the best.
Do you think that's something that I would say all musicians struggle with? It's sort of that between selling yourself and not selling too much.
Yeah. Obviously all musicians have an ego, or you wouldn't want to get up on stage and do something in front of people. But some musicians have a really big ego. Some people start believing their own press, and I'm sure it's a balancing act for everybody.
Do you find that you spend more time on the business side of things, gigs, traveling, and the rest of that, versus music?
It would be such a blessing to have somebody else taking care of the business side, and I could take care of the creative side. I would probably have more time to write. It would be great, but that's not how it is right at this moment.
It's not how life works, right?
No, that's right. But you don't just say, well, I don't have a booking agent, so I'm not going to play. You go out and find the shows.
You've done work in and around Nashville for a while, so I think there's quite a few shows. Obviously not just here in northeastern Ohio, but Nashville, and I'm sure many other places. Wondering, are there any venues that really stand out in your mind in Nashville that you played before?
The best place I've ever played is Marty Stuart got me up to play at the Ramblin Auditorium with him on a show, and it doesn't get any better than that. Wow. I know. After we sang, I thanked him and shook his hand, and we were still on stage, and he said, Hank Williams stood right here, and I said, oh yeah, I know. That was the home of the Grand Ole Opry from the 40s up until they made Opryland and all that. That was the place. And before that, it started out as a church, but then it turned into like a vaudeville theater. Houdini was there, Will Rogers was there. So there's just so many people, not just country musicians, that was on that stage, and just the honor of being on that stage, amazing. I asked Marty's guitar player Kenny Vaughn, who plays a lot with me and has produced some of my records. I asked him, I said, is there any place better to play than this? And he goes, well, you might think so, but he said, there's not.
Within Nashville as well, I'm sure that's probably not the only place that you played, but probably
the biggest. A lot of the honky tonks and, up and down Broadway and, wherever there's a show, where there's a little bit of money and an audience, or even a little bit of money, or an audience.
One or the other.
One or the other, gotta have one or the other, you can just stay home. Anytime that somebody wants to get the big head and think they're great, they need to go to Nashville and walk up and down Lower Broadway and go into all the honky tonks. Because 9 times out of 10, there's somebody in there singing and playing that's better than you. It's a real humbling experience. It's like, oh. And they're playing a honky tonk on Broadway. They don't have a record contract. They don't, and you're like, well, why aren't these people famous?
Do you find that it's easier to play and easier to come up with ideas for songs if you surround yourself with those sorts of people?
Somebody told me years ago, always try to play with musicians that are a little bit better than you. You know, that way they're pulling you up. And I've always been, like I said earlier, I have been so blessed to just always, since that first record, to be surrounded by the best musicians. And that's for no other reason. It's just a blessing. That's all you can call it. It has nothing to do with me.
Just thinking very broadly about what you said, the creative aspect of it, being up on stage. Is there maybe one particular, or it could be two particular elements that you really just so love about music that keeps you coming back and keeps you doing it night after night?
Well, the songwriting part, like I mentioned, it can be therapeutic. You know, you can really, it beats paying a shrink or something. But to me, it's an escape. I don't care what kind of turmoil is going on in the world. I don't care what kind of turmoil is going on in my life. For that time that I'm on stage, that all disappears. And I hope it does for the audience too, because that's the entertainment, that's the whole point of it. You know, because we live in crazy times now, so if I can play a 45-minute show or something and take people's minds off of all the craziness in the world, and they can just hear some music for 45 minutes, well, I've done a pretty good thing.
You know, throughout your life, it seems like gospel music has been important to you as a player. So I'm wondering, how has kind of attending church, growing up with that background, influenced the music that you write and play?
You know, all country music and blues music and everything, it's got that gospel base to it. Just because King David's doing something wrong, you know, in the Old Testament, and it has nothing to do with God or anything, you can't take that out and say it has nothing to do with the Bible. It's in there. And so the stories that we sing about love and murder and everything, it's human life, and that all boils down to gospel stuff. It's all, you know, good and bad. there's plenty of bad. And we should strive more for the good, but it's all the same to me.
Now, in a lot of your music, it seems like you do write a lot of human stories. And so something that relates to people, something you can learn from.
Yeah, I try. I mean, I think Woody Guthrie said just write what you know or something like that. So, and you know, you don't have to live through something to know it. You know somebody that lived through it. You've read a book, something about it. And human experiences aren't that different. They never have been. It's all the same. No matter where you're at in the world, you know, some of the outlying circumstances may be a little different, you know, from long ago till now, or different parts of the world, but it's all the same.
Well, it's been a great conversation with you so far, Rob. I'm wondering if people want to find more about your work, either buy CDs or hear some of your recordings, where can they go to find more about you? RobMcNurlin.com, or just Google Rob McNurlin and all kinds of stuff will pop up. There's all kinds of places to buy the CDs, and, you know, it's on Facebook and all that, you know, the usual places. I really appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.